How to Win Friends and Influence People, full summary. Dale Carnegie. This book was written in 1936. The world has changed completely since then. We have the internet, smartphones, artificial intelligence, and global economies that Carnegie could never have imagined. And yet this book, written almost 90 years ago, is still one of the best-selling books in human history. Over 30 million copies sold, translated into more than 30 languages, used by presidents, CEOs, military generals, and salespeople in every country on Earth. Why? Because human beings have not changed, not one bit. We still want the same things we wanted in 1936. We want to feel important, we want to be understood, we want people to listen to us, we want to be appreciated, and we want to feel like our opinions matter. Carnegie did not discover new truths about people. He simply wrote down the truths that were always there, the invisible rules that govern every conversation, every negotiation, every friendship, and every conflict in human history. And he did it so clearly, so simply, and so honestly that once you read this book, you cannot go back to seeing people the way you used to. Today, we are going to cover every single part of this book, every principle, every story, every lesson. By the end of this video, you will have the knowledge of someone who has read this book cover to cover, so let us begin. Part 1, Fundamental TECHNIQUES in Handling People. Principle 1, Do not criticize, condemn, or complain. There was a famous criminal in the 1930s named Two Gun Crowley. He was a cop killer, a murderer, one of the most wanted men in New York. When police finally surrounded his hideout after a long standoff, they found a letter he had written during the siege. In that letter, Crowley wrote, "And this is real, under my coat is a weary heart, but a kind one, one that would do nobody any harm." A man who had just killed police officers described himself as kind and harmless. He genuinely believed it. This is the first and most important truth Carnegie wants you to understand. 99% of people, no matter what they have done, do not blame themselves for anything. Criminals, cheaters, liars, failures of every kind, they all find a way to justify their behavior, to explain it, to rationalize it, to make themselves the hero of their own story. So what does this mean for you? It means that criticism does not work, ever. When you criticize someone, you are not giving them information that will help them improve. You are attacking their pride, you are wounding their ego. And the moment someone feels attacked, they stop listening to your argument and start building a defense. They stop thinking about whether you are right and start thinking about how to prove you are wrong. The legendary aviation pioneer Bob Hoover was flying home from an air show in San Diego when both engines of his plane suddenly failed. He was a skilled enough pilot to land safely, but the aircraft was severely damaged. When he landed, he discovered that a mechanic had accidentally filled his propeller plane with jet fuel, completely the wrong fuel type. Hoover sought out the mechanic immediately. The young man was standing there, trembling, white with fear, knowing that he had nearly killed 3 people and destroyed an expensive aircraft. He was waiting for the explosion. It never came. Hoover put his arm around the mechanic's shoulder and said, "To show you I'm sure you'll never do this again, I want you to service my plane tomorrow." That is not weakness. That is the deepest form of human intelligence. Because Hoover understood what B.F. Skinner proved in his research decades later, that animals rewarded for good behavior learn faster and retain more than animals punished for bad behavior. And human beings are no different. Criticism leaves wounds. Wounds create resentment. Resentment destroys relationships. And destroyed relationships cost far more than any mistake that started the conversation. This does not mean you ignore problems, it means you find a better way to address them, and Carnegie will show you exactly how to do that in Part 4. For now, remember this: any person of average intelligence can criticize, complain, and condemn. It requires no skill and no character. What requires genuine strength is to understand another person's point of view, to resist the urge to attack, and to choose a response that actually produces change. Principle 2, Give honest and sincere appreciation. There is a difference between flattery and appreciation. One is hollow, the other is one of the most powerful forces in human relationships. Flattery is telling someone what they want to hear regardless of whether it is true. People see through it immediately. It feels slippery. It makes them trust you less, not more. Appreciation is different. Genuine appreciation means you have actually paid attention to someone, identified something real and specific that they have done well, and told them so clearly and sincerely. William James, one of the greatest psychologists who ever lived, said that the deepest craving in human nature is the desire to be appreciated. Not liked, not admired from a distance. Appreciated meaning that someone actually noticed what you did and took the time to tell you it mattered. Carnegie believed that the hunger for appreciation is so powerful that it drives almost everything human beings do. People climb mountains to feel appreciated. They write novels. They build companies. They start wars. They sacrifice their health, their time, their relationships, all for the feeling that what they do matters to someone. And most of us are starving for it. Think about the people in your life, your colleagues, your employees, your family. When was the last time you genuinely told one of them specifically and sincerely that something they did was excellent, not a general good job, something real, something specific enough that they knew you had actually been paying attention? Try this tomorrow. Find one person who does something for you that you have been taking for granted and tell them with complete sincerity that you noticed and that you are grateful. Watch what happens to their face. Watch what happens to the relationship. Ralph Waldo Emerson used to say that every man he met was in some way superior to him, and therefore he could always learn something from and sincerely appreciate something about every person he encountered. That habit of looking for what is genuinely worth appreciating in others, and then expressing it, is one of the simplest and most transformative habits in Carnegie's entire book. Principle 3: Arouse in the other person an eager want. Carnegie used a fishing analogy here that is so simple it sounds almost too obvious. But pay attention, because this principle is the foundation of every successful negotiation, every effective sale, and every persuasive conversation you will ever have. When you go fishing, you do not put what you like on the hook. You do not bait the hook with strawberries because you enjoy strawberries. You put on the hook what the fish likes, a worm or a small bait fish, because you are trying to catch the fish, not feed yourself. Now ask yourself honestly, when you try to persuade someone, a client, a manager, a partner, a child, whose interests do you start with? Most people start with their own. They explain what they want, why it, why it matters to them. And the other person sits there, politely listening but not really engaged, because nobody is as interested in what you want as you are. The moment you shift the conversation to what the other person wants, their goals, their problems, their dreams, their fears, everything changes. Now they are paying attention. Now they are engaged. Now they feel like this conversation is about them, which means it is the most important conversation they have had all day. Andrew Carnegie, the industrialist, not the author, wanted to do business with a company called Pullman. Negotiations were stalled. Then Carnegie suggested that the merged company should be called the Pullman Palace Car Company. The moment he made that suggestion, the Pullman Company became significantly more enthusiastic about the deal. The name was not a small detail, it was everything. It told Pullman that his legacy would be preserved, his identity would survive the merger, what he cared about most would be honored, and when people know that what they care about most will be honored, they become your strongest allies. This is the art of seeing the world through another person's eyes. It does not mean you abandon your own interests. It means you present your interests in terms of how they serve theirs, because ultimately that is the only way anyone ever truly decides to cooperate. Part 2: 6 Ways to Make People Like You. Principle 1: Become genuinely interested in other people. Think about the most universally loved creature on Earth. Carnegie's answer was a dog. A dog is not intelligent in the way humans are. It cannot solve problems or hold a conversation. But a dog does one thing better than almost any human being: it is completely and totally interested in you. When you walk in the door, the dog does not check its phone. It does not think about what it needs from you. It explodes with joy simply because you are there. And what do people feel when they are around a dog? They feel important, they feel loved, they feel like they matter. This is exactly what genuine interest in other people produces. When you are truly curious about someone, their background, their family, their struggles, their goals, their opinions, they feel it. And that feeling makes them trust you, like you, and want to be around you in a way that no amount of charm or wit or appearance can replicate. The key word is genuine. This is not a technique you perform. It is a mindset you develop. You decide to become the kind of person who finds other people fascinating, because when you look closely enough, every person is. Ask people about their lives with real curiosity. Remember what they tell you. Follow up later. Go out of your way to talk to people who are below your status level. The employee no one notices, the cleaning staff, the intern. They will remember you forever. And with people above your level, express genuine interest in their work and their experience. They feel important when they can share the lessons they have learned with someone who actually wants to hear them. Principle 2. Smile. Carnegie dedicated an entire chapter to this. One word: smile. New York stockbroker named William Steinhardt was, by his own admission, a notorious grouch. He rarely smiled. His home life was tense. His professional relationships were strained. On Carnegie's advice, he committed to one simple experiment: he would smile more. He started each morning by smiling at himself in the mirror, then smiling at his wife, the doorman, the cashier at the subway booth, his colleagues on the trading floor. Within 2 months, he reported that his home was happier than it had been in years. His colleagues were more cooperative. His clients were more loyal. And he was making more money than before, not because his skills had changed, but because the entire environment around him had changed in response to one small shift in his behavior. A smile says something that words cannot easily say. It says, "I am glad you exist. I am happy to be in your presence. You are not a burden to me." For a world full of people who secretly wonder whether they matter to anyone, a genuine smile is one of the most powerful messages you can send. Notice the word genuine. A forced smile fools nobody. People can tell the difference between a real smile and a performance in less than a second. Carnegie is not asking you to paste an expression on your face. He is asking you to find something real to appreciate about every person you meet and let that appreciation show. Principle 3. Remember that a person's name is the sweetest sound in any language. Napoleon Bonaparte could remember the name of virtually every soldier in his army. He made it a priority. He paid attention. He asked for names to be repeated. He wrote them down. He reviewed them. And his soldiers would have followed him to the end of the earth partly because of it, because when Napoleon remembered your name, it meant you were not invisible. You were not one of thousands. You were you. Your name is your identity. It is the first thing that was ever given to you. It is the sound your parents made when they looked at you for the first time. And when someone remembers it, especially someone they have only met once, it sends a message that goes deeper than any compliment. You were worth remembering. When you forget someone's name or mispronounce it or do not bother to use it at all, the message is equally powerful in the opposite direction. It says, "You were not important enough for me to remember." That stings in a way people do not always express but always feel. The technique is simple. When you meet someone, pay maximum attention to the moment their name is spoken. Repeat it back immediately. "It's great to meet you, Sarah." Use it again naturally during the conversation. When you are alone afterward, write it down. Connect it to something memorable about the person, and the next time you see them, use it. Andrew Carnegie, again the industrialist, once won a major contract partly because he remembered the names of the business partners he was negotiating with and used them naturally throughout the meeting. His competitors were equally qualified, but only Carnegie made every person in that room feel personally seen. Principle 4. Be a good listener. Encourage others to talk about themselves. Carnegie once attended a dinner party and was seated next to a renowned botanist. Carnegie had no particular knowledge of botany, but he was curious. He asked question after question. He listened with complete attention for hours as the botanist described exotic plants, unusual experiments, and decades of research. At the end of the evening, the botanist told the host that Carnegie was one of the most interesting and stimulating conversationalists he had ever met. Carnegie had said almost nothing. He had simply listened. This is one of the most counterintuitive lessons in the entire book. We think that to be interesting, we must say interesting things. But what Carnegie discovered, and what the best conversationalists in the world understand, is that the most powerful thing you can do in any conversation is to make the other person feel completely heard. Most people are not listening during conversations. They are waiting. They are half listening to the other person while simultaneously constructing what they plan to say next. The moment the other person pauses, they launch into their own story, their own opinion, their own experience, and the other person walks away feeling slightly unsatisfied, like the conversation was about the other person, not about them. Listening is not passive. Real listening is one of the most active things a human being can do. It means giving someone your full, undivided attention. It means asking follow-up questions that show you understood what they said. It means resisting every impulse to redirect the conversation toward yourself. When you do this consistently, something remarkable happens. People start describing you as a great conversationalist even when you barely spoke. They start trusting you with things they do not tell others. They seek you out. They recommend you. They want to work with you, all because you gave them the rarest gift in the modern world: your complete and genuine attention. Principle 5. Talk in terms of the other person's interests. This builds directly on the fishing analogy from part 1. Before any important conversation, ask yourself one question: what does this person care about most right now? Not in general, right now, this week, this quarter. What is the problem keeping them up at night? What is the goal they are most excited about? What is the challenge they are struggling with that nobody else seems to understand? When you walk into a conversation having done that preparation, you can present whatever you need to present entirely through the lens of their interests. And suddenly the meeting is not about what you want, it is about what they want, with your proposal as the vehicle to get them there. Carnegie studied the most successful people in business, politics, and social life. And he found that the ones who built the deepest loyalty and the most lasting influence were the ones who made every person they dealt with feel like their specific interests had been considered, understood, and prioritized. This is not manipulation. Manipulation means steering someone toward something that serves you at their expense. This is alignment, genuinely finding the overlap between what you need and what they need and leading with that overlap. Principle 6. Make the other person feel important, and do it sincerely. Almost every person you will ever meet secretly believes, in some place they would never admit, that they are not fully recognized for how intelligent, capable, or valuable they actually are. They feel slightly underestimated, slightly overlooked, slightly less appreciated than they deserve. You have the power to change that for every person you meet. And when you do, you become one of the most memorable people who has ever walked into their life. The rule is simple: find something genuinely impressive or admirable about every person you interact with. And acknowledge it sincerely, not the same generic compliment for everyone, something specific, something real, something that tells them you were actually paying attention to who they are. The philosopher William James said that the deepest principle in human nature is the craving to be appreciated. Carnegie built an entire career on the proof of that principle. When you satisfy that craving, genuinely, specifically, sincerely, you create loyalty that no contract, no salary, and no incentive structure can replicate. Part 3. How to win people to your way of thinking. Principle 1. The only way to get the best of an argument is to avoid it. Carnegie was absolute on this point. There is no such thing as winning an argument. If you lose, you lose. If you win, you have wounded the other person's pride. And a wounded pride is far more dangerous than a lost debate. Think about what happens in your brain when someone tells you that you are wrong. Before you have even processed whether they are right, your body is already preparing a response. Your ego is already mobilizing. The argument is over before it begins, because now you are not searching for truth, you are protecting your identity. When an argument starts, Carnegie says the first thing to do is distrust your own instinctive reaction, because your first instinct will almost always be to fight back, to correct, to prove, and acting on that instinct will almost always make things worse. Instead, listen completely. Look for any areas of genuine agreement. Thank the other person for raising the point, tell them you will think about it carefully. And then, when emotions have settled, revisit the substance with facts and curiosity instead of combat. People do not change their minds during arguments. They change their minds in quiet moments afterward, when the pressure is gone and they can think clearly. Your job is not to win the argument in real time. Your job is to leave the other person in a state where they are genuinely willing to reconsider. Principle 2. Show respect for the other person's opinions. Never say you're wrong. The moment you tell someone they are wrong, something shuts down inside them. Not because they know they are right, sometimes they know perfectly well they might be wrong, but because you have just told them that their judgment, their experience, and their reasoning are inferior to yours, and that feels like an attack. People who feel attacked do not update their beliefs, they defend them. Even when they secretly suspect you might be right, they will argue against you simply to protect their sense of self. Carnegie's approach was never to say you're wrong. Instead, he used phrases like, I may be wrong, I often am. Let's examine the facts together. This disarms people completely. The moment you admit you might be wrong, the other person no longer needs to defend themselves. Now they can actually listen. When the author once admired some overpriced curtains to a friend, the friend immediately told him he had been cheated. He became defensive and started justifying the purchase. But when a different friend came in and admired the same curtains and then gently mentioned they might have cost a bit more than necessary, the author freely agreed and even laughed about it. Same message, completely different result, because the second friend made him feel respected rather than attacked. Principle 3. If you are wrong, admit it quickly and emphatically. Carnegie was once walking his dog in a park where dogs were required to be on a leash. A police officer stopped him and warned him. Carnegie apologized and promised to comply, but soon enough the dog was running free again and the same officer found him. This time, before the officer could say a single word, Carnegie launched into a complete admission. He was wrong, he knew it, it was inexcusable, the officer had every right to issue a fine, he was absolutely at fault. The officer let him go with a smile. When you are wrong and you know it, the fastest and most effective thing you can do is admit it, completely enthusiastically before anyone has to tell you. Because the person who is about to criticize you is doing so in order to feel important. The moment you beat them to it, they no longer need to criticize you. Their desire to feel important is now satisfied by forgiving you, which is a far more pleasant experience for everyone. Admitting your mistakes quickly does not make you look weak, it makes you look secure, confident, self-aware, and those qualities generate more respect than being right ever could. Principle 4. Begin in a friendly way. A man's rent was being raised by his landlord to an amount he simply could not afford. He could have complained. He could have argued. He could have threatened to leave. Instead, he told his landlord how much he appreciated the building, how well it was managed, how happy he had been there, and how much he wished he could stay, but explained with genuine regret that he simply could not afford the new rate. The landlord lowered the rent. Not because of logic, not because of pressure, because of tone, because the tenant approached a potential conflict with warmth and genuine appreciation instead of hostility, and it completely changed the dynamic of the conversation. A drop of honey catches more flies than a gallon of gall. Carnegie used this phrase repeatedly because it captures something fundamental about human psychology. People do not respond to force, they respond to warmth. When you begin any difficult conversation with genuine friendliness, not fake pleasantness, but real warmth, you disarm defenses before they even form. Principle 5. Get the other person saying yes immediately. Every time someone says no, something happens in their psychology. They become committed to that no. They start looking for reasons to justify it. They become increasingly resistant to changing their position simply because changing it would mean admitting they were wrong. Carnegie's strategy was to never give someone the opportunity to say no at the beginning of a conversation. He would start with questions that the other person would naturally agree with, questions about things they cared about, problems they were experiencing, goals they wanted to achieve. He would build a series of small agreements before introducing the main point. The key is that this must be genuine. You are not tricking people. You are genuinely finding common ground and establishing it clearly before moving to the areas where you differ. You are reminding both yourself and the other person that you share more than you disagree about. And from that foundation of shared agreement, difficult conversations become significantly easier. Principle 6. Let the other person do a great deal of the talking. Carnegie described it like a bottle. When someone has something they want to say, something they feel strongly about, something that matters to them, that feeling fills them up. Until the bottle is empty, they cannot take in anything new. Every interruption refills the bottle. Every time you cut them off, they have to start over. The most effective thing you can do when someone disagrees with you is to let them talk until they are completely finished. Not to formulate your response while they speak. Not to interrupt with corrections. Just to listen completely until they have said everything they need to say. When the bottle is empty, something remarkable happens. The tension drops. The person feels heard, and in that state, calm, satisfied, genuinely listened to, they become capable of hearing you in return. Principle 7. Let the other person feel that the idea is his or hers. People love their own ideas. They are far more committed to executing something they feel they came up with than something they were told to do, even if the underlying idea is identical. Carnegie described a negotiation with an extremely difficult counterpart who refused to compromise on anything. After some time, Carnegie stopped pushing his own solutions and instead said, "You know this subject better than anyone. I want to hear your ideas. How do you think we could reach an agreement here?" The other person's entire demeanor changed. He stopped being an opponent and became a collaborator. He offered options. He suggested solutions. Carnegie chose one of them and moved forward, and because the solution had come from the other person, he was deeply invested in making it work. Wise people do not always need credit. They need results. If getting results means letting someone else feel like the idea was theirs, the wisest move is to let them have that feeling, because their ownership of the idea makes the outcome far more likely to succeed. Principle 8. Try honestly to see things from the other person's point of view. This is one of the most difficult principles in the book, and one of the most powerful. Before any important conversation, Carnegie would ask himself, if I had been born with this person's genetics, raised in their family, educated in their schools, shaped by their experiences, what would I believe right now? What would I be afraid of? What would I want? When you can genuinely answer that question, not to win an argument, but because you actually want to understand, everything about how you communicate changes. You stop seeing the other person as irrational or difficult. You start seeing them as someone who arrived at their position through a path that makes complete sense given where they started. This does not mean you agree with them, it means you understand them, and understanding someone is the foundation of every lasting agreement. Principle 9. Be sympathetic to the other person's ideas and desires. When someone is upset, they are not in a state to process information. They are in a state to feel understood. Giving them information before giving them sympathy is like trying to pour water into a cup that is already overflowing. Carnegie's formula was simple. When dealing with an emotional person, first acknowledge what they feel, not whether they are right to feel it, just that you understand they feel it. I completely understand why you would feel that way. In your position, I would probably feel the same thing. These words do not cost you anything, they commit you to nothing. But they do something remarkable. They calm the other person down, because they feel understood. And a person who feels understood is a person who is ready to think rather than just react. Principle 10. Appeal to the nobler motives. Carnegie observed that people almost always have two reasons for doing something. The real reason, which is usually about self-interest, fear, or ego, and a nobler reason that they are proud to tell people about. The nobler reason is not fake. It is real, but it is not the whole story. When you appeal to someone's nobler motives, their sense of fairness, their integrity, their honor, their reputation as a trustworthy person, you give them the opportunity to act from the best version of themselves. And most people, when given that opportunity, will take it. Carnegie used this when someone was about to break a contract with him. Instead of threatening legal action, he told the person that he had always known them to be a person of the highest integrity, and he was sure that on reflection they would want to honor the agreement, not because they had to, but because that was the kind of person they were. The contract was honored. Principle 11. Dramatize your ideas. In a world drowning in information, the ideas that survive are not the most accurate ones, they are the most memorable ones. A cash register salesman was trying to convince a store owner that his slow checkout process was costing him money. He could have shown a spreadsheet. Instead, he reached into his pocket and began dropping pennies on the floor, one for each customer who passed through the slow line. The sound of those coins hitting the floor was more persuasive than any data he could have presented. Steve Jobs did not introduce the iPod as a device with 1 gigabyte of storage. He said it was 1,000 songs in your pocket. Same product, one description changes nothing, the other changed an industry. Find a way to make your idea visible, tangible, and emotionally real. Not gimmicky, genuine. When people can see, touch, or vividly imagine what you are describing, it moves from an abstract concept into something they can act on. Principle 12. Throw down a challenge. When all else fails, appeal to the desire to excel, to the competitive instinct, to the part of every person that does not want to be the one who could not do it. Carnegie was not talking about manipulation. He was talking about the fundamental human drive toward mastery. People want to prove their capabilities to themselves as much as to anyone else. When you frame a challenge as something that will take genuine skill and effort, and express confidence that the person is capable of meeting it, you activate one of the deepest motivations in human nature. Part 4. Be a leader. How to change people without giving offense or arousing resentment. Principle 1. Begin with praise and honest appreciation. A dentist is about to do something that will hurt you. Before the needle goes in, she makes sure your mouth is comfortable. She adjusts the chair. She asks if you are okay. Not because she enjoys the small talk, because she knows that a patient who feels cared for tolerates discomfort far better than one who feels processed. Praise before criticism works the same way. When someone hears something genuinely positive about themselves first, their defenses come down. Their ego is not threatened. They become capable of hearing difficult feedback without feeling attacked. The praise must be specific and genuine. A vague, "you're doing great," followed by a list of problems is worse than no praise at all. It feels manipulative. But specific, real appreciation for something the person actually did well creates an environment where the subsequent feedback lands as guidance rather than attack. Principle 2. Call attention to people's mistakes indirectly. Carnegie suggested replacing the word "but" with the word "and" when combining praise with correction. The difference seems small, the effect is significant. "You've done excellent work on this project, but there are some errors in the final section." The "but" erases everything before it. The person hears only the criticism. "You've done excellent work on this project, and in the final section we have an opportunity to make it even stronger." Suddenly, the criticism is not an attack. It is an extension of the success that already exists. John Wanamaker, one of the great retail pioneers, once saw a customer standing ignored at a sales counter while his staff chatted among themselves in the corner. Instead of reprimanding the staff in front of the customer, he went over and served the customer himself. Then he handed the purchase to his employees to wrap. He said nothing critical. He simply demonstrated the standard he expected, and his staff remembered it far longer than they would have remembered a lecture. Principle 3. Talk about your own mistakes before criticizing the other person. When you are about to correct someone, tell them first about a time you made the same mistake, or a similar one, not as a performance, as a genuine acknowledgement that you have been in their position and you understand how it happens. This does the most important thing any leader can do before delivering feedback. It removes the power imbalance. Suddenly, you are not a superior judging an inferior. You are one human being who has made mistakes, sharing something useful with another human being who has also made mistakes. And in that space of shared humanity, feedback is received completely differently. Principle 4. Ask questions instead of giving direct orders. There is a difference between "do it this way" and "what do you think would happen if we tried it this way?" The first creates compliance. The second creates ownership. When people arrive at a conclusion through their own thinking, even when you guided them toward it with questions, they believe in it more deeply, execute it more enthusiastically, and adapt it more creatively when circumstances change. A manager who asks questions is not showing weakness. He is showing the deepest form of respect for the people he works with, the belief that they are capable of thinking, not just following. Principle 5. Let the other person save face. This principle may be the most underestimated in the entire book. When someone makes a mistake, they already know it, and they are already in some degree of pain about it. The choice you face at that moment is whether to add to that pain by making them publicly acknowledge it, by rubbing it in, by forcing them to grovel, or to resolve the problem in a way that allows them to maintain their dignity. People never forget how you made them feel when they were at their worst. If you allow them to save face at that moment, if you give them an interpretation of events that lets them preserve their pride, they will be loyal to you in ways that years of good treatment in ordinary circumstances cannot create. Principle 6. Praise every improvement. Praise is not just for finished products, it is for every step in the right direction. When you acknowledge improvement, even small, incremental improvement, you give the person fuel to keep going. You tell them that the direction they are moving in is correct. You tell them that someone notices, and the hunger to keep earning that recognition becomes one of the strongest motivators available. Carnegie said that the ability to give genuine, specific praise for genuine, specific improvements transformed more human performance than any other tool he encountered in 50 years of studying success. Principle 7. Give the other person a fine reputation to live up to. Tell someone they are honest and watch what happens when they are tempted to be dishonest. Tell someone they are one of your best people and watch how they perform. Tell someone you have always seen them as someone with exceptional potential and watch how they start behaving like someone with exceptional potential. People rise or fall to the level of what the most important people in their lives believe about them. Carnegie was not talking about empty flattery. He was talking about identifying something genuinely good in a person, a capability, a value, a quality, and naming it clearly, making it real by saying it out loud, giving them something to be. Principle 8. Use encouragement. Make the fault seem easy to correct. If you tell someone they are hopeless at something, they become hopeless at it. If you tell them they have a natural instinct for it but just need more practice, they go practice. The difference between "you're bad at this" and "you're close, just adjust this one thing" is not a difference in accuracy, it is a difference in what the person does next. One statement produces giving up, the other produces effort. A great dance instructor does not tell a poor dancer that they have no sense of rhythm. She says, "You have a natural feel for the music, let's work on translating that into your footwork." And the student believes her, and tries harder, and often gets there. Principle 9. Make the other person happy about doing the thing you suggest. The final principle of the book is also the most sophisticated. Carnegie is not asking you to pretend that your interests do not exist. He is asking you to present those interests in a way that makes the other person genuinely excited about helping you achieve them. When you ask someone to do something, think about what is in it for them, not just practically, emotionally. Does it give them an opportunity to grow? Does it signal your trust in them? Does it align with something they care about? Does it give them a story they will be proud to tell? When you frame your request in those terms, genuinely, specifically, honestly, you stop making requests and start making offers. And people respond to offers in a fundamentally different way than they respond to requests. This is how to win friends and influence people. Not a book of tricks, not a manual for manipulation. A complete and honest guide to the art of caring about other people, deeply enough to understand them, clearly enough to communicate with them, and wisely enough to create relationships that last. Carnegie wrote this book because he believed that the single greatest skill a human being can develop is the ability to understand and genuinely work with other people. Not to defeat them, not to use them, to work with them, to build something together that neither could build alone. If you have watched this entire video, you now have the knowledge of someone who has read every page of one of the most important books ever written about human relationships. The question now is what you do with it. Because knowledge without action is just entertainment. Pick one principle, start tomorrow, just one conversation where you apply one thing you heard today and see what happens. If this video gave you value, subscribe. Because we are going to do this with every great book that has ever been written, every lesson, every story, every principle that the most successful people in history used to build extraordinary lives. The next one is coming soon, do not miss it.